Welcome to the Merry and Bright Crochet Along, hosted by B.Hooked Crochet and sponsored by Love Crochet. My name is Brittany, and I'll be your guide over the next 3 weeks to walk you through the techniques you'll need to know to complete your pillow. Before we get started, head over to bhookedcrochet.com/merryandbrightpillow to find the written instructions, information about the supplies, and to download your color diagram. That page will be updated on December 3rd and December 10th for part 2 and 3 of this cowl. Well, we covered most of the difficult techniques in clue number 1. So clue number 2, you're going to find to be very, very simple. Since we're going to be doing the lettering with cross stitching, we're going to crochet the entire side just with single crochet. So let's have a review of that. The first thing you need to do is create your slip knot. And then you'll chain the number of chains that's indicated in your pattern. You're going to locate that second chain from the hook, and I'm going to flip it over and work in that back bump. And we're just making one single crochet into every chain. Now once again, I'm just working with the little swatch here. So when you get to the end of your row, we'll continue on with row 2 by chaining 1, turning our work, and then finding the first stitch. We're going to make a single crochet there, and one single crochet into every remaining stitch. Now just like before, it's always a good idea to count your stitches just to make sure you're on the right track, that you don't have any uneven or wobbly edges. Now in terms of the crochet part, that's really all there is to it. We've reviewed the single crochet. We're working it the same as we did for part number 1. The only difference here is, of course, we're not changing colors. We're just making one solid square. And let's have a look at the actual technique now, the color work technique when we're cross stitching on crochet. So what we're going to do is just repeat that over and over until we have the number of rows that's indicated in our pattern. And once we do, we can go ahead and fasten off. And then you'll just pull that tail through the loop on your hook. That'll finish it off. And the next technique is really the fun part. We're going to learn how to cross stitch now on our piece of crochet. Now you can see that it's wanting to curl a little bit on the edges. You're seeing that a lot more with my square or my rectangle, because it's a lot smaller than yours. So you're always going to see a little bit of curling on the edges, kind of like you see there. And it's not a huge deal. If you want to wet block, then you can absolutely do so. You'll want to check your measurements, and if it doesn't equal that, then maybe you will have to wet block a little bit. And you can check out a resource I have on that at bhookedcrochet.com/blockyourproject. That'll give you the rundown on blocking and the different techniques that you can use to just give your work a better look. It's going to make it more professional, more clean, and of course, it's going to prevent a little bit of that rolling. We don't have to worry about that too much because we're going to sew this thing together. So let's have a look now at how to do the cross stitches. Now the first thing we need to do is make ourselves a nice long cut of yarn. Don't worry about making it so long that you can do the entire letter or the entire thing. Just work in sections that you're comfortable with. And then we're just going to take our darning needle, thread that on one of the ends. And we do want to double this up. Now the next thing we need to realize is what's going on here with our framework of stitches. So we talked about it briefly in the first clue, where we see these nice defined lines, and it's really tempting for us to call that one row, but it's actually 2. So just keep that in the back of your mind, because we're going to be working one stitch for each one of these color blocks. That's how it's given in our diagram. So one stitch would be right here. the next stitch would be right there on top of it. And that's how we're going to follow. Well, the cross stitch technique is really fun. We're going to zero in on the stitch that we're going to work on. So let's say I'm working on this stitch right here. I want to make sure I come in from the wrong side of the work because our tails are going to be situated on the back there. So go from back to front, pull your yarn through, and leave yourself enough slack here at the back so that we don't pull it all the way through. So that's the bottom corner. I'm going to jump over to the top corner. Just insert my needle there and pull it through. And we don't want to pull it so tight that we distort the stitches, but we do need to have it nice and straight. Now the next thing I'll do is come in, catch that bottom corner from back to front. And then the last one I want to do is that top corner. Now let's say I want to go ahead and put a cross stitch directly on top of this. Well, I can't start at that same bottom corner that I just did because if I do, I'll just work the yarn back out. So what I'm going to do, I still want to come from back to front, so I'm going to work on that top corner. Pull that through, then go down into that bottom corner. Now I'm going to jump over down here, come through, and then go in that top corner. So I always want to make sure I end where the next stitch is going to go. So just keep that in mind. It just makes things easier. It lets you have shorter like floats over on the back side there. And that's the cross stitch technique. So you're probably wondering now, well, what are some tips and tricks to following the cross stitch pattern based off of the diagram? Well, let's have a look at that diagram. So this is what the color diagram looks like for the bright side of our pillow, clue number 2. We don't really need to refer to this diagram until we're ready to do the cross stitching, and the cross stitching we can see in our dark color here. So once again, when you're working with multiple colors and a black and white diagram, it's much easier just to keep it simple, and then you'll refer to your written instructions to figure out exactly which color each letter is supposed to be, because each letter is going to be a different color. Well, what you need to do is, well, first note that each row that you see here and here, that is one row of single crochet. Each one of these little blocks or squares represents one stitch. Now it also represents one cross stitch as well. So when you do get to this section here, each one of these little blocks is going to be one cross stitch. So what I recommend doing is working one letter at a time. You can start on one of the edges. You'll count down the number of rows until you see your first stitch. You'll work that cross stitch, and then you can just go from there. You'll work a cross stitch next to it and the one above, and then just count the blocks here in the diagram and coordinate that with the stitches that are on your single crochet piece, your fabric, and work your cross stitches that way. Now this is just one way of doing cross stitch on crochet. If you are a cross stitcher and you have a comfortable way of working these, by all means do whatever you're familiar with, whatever you're most comfortable with. But if you've never done it at all, you can follow these steps, and it's really quite simple. So the last thing we need to do is talk about what we need to do at the back. Well, let's say I'm at the point where I just want to end this line. I don't want to continue anymore. Then all I would do is simply trim off the ends on the background, or just let's say I ran out of yarn and so that's all I have left, and I have these two tails here at the back. Well, what I like to do, and really you could leave them like this, but I do like to just tie them to secure things off. Now I'm not pulling tight because I don't want to distort the stitches on the front side. I'm just kind of steadying them at the back, so if it gets pulled on, they're not going to come back out. Well, we don't really have to make things nice and tidy on the inside here because this is going to be the wrong side or what's on the inside of the pillow. So all we need to do is finish our lettering, tie them off on the back whenever we have to add some more yarn, or if we need to change to a new section. Just tie them off wherever you can, whatever ends are available, just so that they're secure on the back and you don't have to worry about them. Once you do that, I mean, that's all there is to clue number 2. We just want to finish our, obviously crocheting our section. We want to finish our cross stitch based on the diagram. And then next week, we're going to learn how to put everything together.